Hello everyone, I am Rekha Bisht from IIT Bombay, part of FP6. The title of my presentation today is a comparison of socio-economic status, agriculture production and dietary diversity in two different geomorphological tribal settings in Akole, Maharashtra. The research objectives that we had envisaged for ourselves were basically something that would be linking agriculture to diet diversity by comparing households that produce predominantly for their own consumption to those that cater to the market. And in the process, we would also try to analyze factors for crop diversification and commercialization, such as the socio-economic conditions, adoption of new technologies, access to markets, availability of fertilizers, seeds, insecticides, electricity, and credit facilities. Now, the entire study, we have divided into three different parts. And part one is the study of agriculture and dietary diversity in two geomorphological setting. This is entirely a qualitative study. The area that we have identified for ourselves is the Akole block. This is in district of Ahmednagar in the state of Maharashtra. A very defined characteristic of this particular block is there is a high diverse geomorphological variation in this particular region, in the sense that you have a hilly area, there's a plateau, and there is the flat plains. So as the geography changes, so does the edaphic factors, the climatic conditions, the socioeconomic status of the people, and also the cropping patterns. So for our own convenience, we have divided this entire area into two regions. We call as the hilly area, which is in the west, as the upland, and the low-lying plains and the east as the lowland region. In the upland region, we have identified two villages, which is Jagidarwadi and Udadwane, whereas in the low-lying eastern region, we have identified Shimsherpur and Devthan villages for our study. So the methodology that we followed is the use of semi-structured interviews with the locals, focused group discussion independently with members of the community. Then we try to present seasonal calendars by discussion with the various villagers, and then also record their 24 hours dietary recalls. So coming to the upland region, now this is in the crestline of the Sahyadri, and it has sparse population. They are very thick forests, hilly area. The productivity is very low in terms of agriculture. There's a poor transport and communication network in this area. The agriculture is actually vulnerable to the climatic condition, but it is in terms of the productivity being low, or there would be a failure of crops, but it is not affected by the market conditions as we've seen during the COVID-19 periods. And agriculture is primarily subsistence, and there's a gradual shift towards organic cultivation, with more and more emphasis now being on preservation and conservation of the traditional indigenous seed varieties, and also for subsequent uses in the in the next cropping season, or even for distribution to other areas. Agriculture is primarily rain-fed here. In fact, ironically, this area receives the maximum rainfall in the state of Maharashtra, but there's a huge crisis of drinking water all throughout the year. Most of the houses here in the village, they have the small kitchen garden, and generally they are self-sufficient in terms of food. Rice, wheat, and millets are the staple. Health infrastructure is relatively poor, with the nearest hospital is almost 10 kilometers away. In stark contrast are the lowland villages. Right now, here you can see there is a very good access of roads. The infrastructure, transport, communication networks are very well developed. Of the total net sown area here, 100% is under irrigation. So maximum area is under cash crops such as the pomegranate, onions, exotic vegetables, and flowers. Dairy is a major subsidiary occupation here. The various government schemes and subsidies, such as the farm ponds for use of modern agriculture practices like the drip irrigation. There are better storage facilities. There are check dams for farmers. Farmers use modern implements here, and the productivity in general is quite high. There is a heavy investment into agriculture. Loans for crop production is a routine feature, and there's an excessive use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Now, coming to the inferences that we actually draw from our studies is, as you can see, there has been a significant changes in the cropping pattern in both the upland as well as in the lowland. Now, although the entire cropping pattern is governed by the climatic condition, irrigation has played a prominent role in changing the nature and extent of cropping pattern. Now, there's a great contribution which has been actually made by the cooperators providing financial support. There are farming equipments, there's labors, there is the use of insecticides, electricity, good transport network, access to the market. So if you talk of the overall picture, there has been a change from the food grains to exotic vegetables and flowers, primarily in the low-lying area. And the major change that you have seen from the upland and the lowland could actually be that intensification of crops, or what would you say, diversification, crop diversification or intensification for commercial gain is more evident in the lowland area. And the primary reason for that could be the access to the markets and 100% irrigation facilities. We also tried to analyze the population for food security. That is the anxiety that the household might have in terms of budget or food supply being insufficient to meet the basic requirement. And we observed that the locals in the study region never had this experience of running out of food. In fact, they did not have any perception of having a diet which was inadequate in quality or quantity. So whenever there was some kind of a scarcity in terms of budget or inaccessibility to the market, as during the COVID-19 situation, they always had their little kitchen gardens to fall back on. Food security awareness, we found, is much more higher in the lowland as compared to the upland people. And by awareness, we had the parameters like the clean drinking water, using clean utensils, filtering the drinking water for domestic users, washing hands, use of toilets, and washing hands after the use of toilets also, and washing vegetables, crops, keeping the entire area clean. So these kind of the knowledge practices were higher in the lowland area. However, the frequency of nutrition information and nutrition knowledge of their food was much higher in the upland people. Now, this despite there is a very poor network of television, radio, or newspapers, or dissemination of information in general in the upland area. It is primarily because of the efforts of the NGO which is working in that area that people have very high nutrition information. Because in terms of the nutritional value of the local plants, right, and the medicinal value, so the importance of the local and the seasonal crop is very high in the upland area. Plus, they're much more aware of their diets. Interestingly, none of the studied population was ready to purchase any kind of organic food at a higher price. Now, with that said, they generally grow organic crops and sell it at a premium price in the market. Also, we found out that any kind of agriculture surplus money which they might have, they are not ready to invest in food. Rather, they would invest it in marriages or education, or in making clearing of their loans, etc. So another factor is, like, when you study the consumption pattern in the upland and the lowland areas, we found that almost 90% of the crops in the upland area are consumed, with only 10% being sold in the market, like the millets, the tomatoes, and the rice. And that also depends upon the requirements of the individual households. Whereas it's the complete opposite in the lowland, where 98% of the total area of the crops which have been produced in that area are actually sold in the market, and only 2% is for self-consumption. And even the crops, the basic staples like the wheat or pulses like the chana dal, they're actually produced from the PDS shops. Diet diversity in both upland and lowland region is pretty high. Now we'd like to see the seasonal calendars that we try to prepare from the region. As you can see, there are two agriculture seasons, primarily because it is a rain-fed agriculture, and there are three in the lowland region because it's 100% under irrigation in terms of there is a well network of canal, there's a river system, there is farm ponds, there are tube wells, right? Out migration is seen in the upland, especially during the lean agriculture season, whereas in migration is in the lowland. Because of crop diversification, intensification of agriculture, so there is a lot of commercial activity. In fact, there are niche jobs which have come up here in terms of fruit collectors or as orchard managers. So ample job opportunities for people in this area. Now, because they're close to the market, subsidiary activities like a dairy is a very important activity here. And people invest heavily on agriculture in terms of taking loans from the banks or the cooperators, whereas no such thing is actually seen in the upland area. Now, when we compare the diet diversity score in terms of HDDS, which is the household dietary diversity score, and the women's dietary diversity score, so these are high, right? And so this actually is a reflection of the economic activity, the ability of a household to access a variety of food. Now, so these values which are high in both the regions, it could be because the upland has an access to the forest, Right, so you have a plethora of tubers, then there are roots, there are fruits and vegetables. So there's a wide variety of flora and fauna at the disposal. And also we found through our observation that subsistence agriculture households generally have a very diverse portfolio of crops. So the diversity in the diet tends to increase. And in the case of the lowland people, so they have a very easy access to the markets. So the variety, right, the quantity and the quality of the food which is available again to them is very high. So now coming to the second part of our study, which is school intervention program, where we try to introduce health awareness program for school going children. We identified 7 graders in a primary school, one each in each of the village. Now these schools were co-educational, non-religious, they were non-special, and they were government funded. So we try to get their background information in terms of their age, their gender, the number of siblings, their height, weight, their usual diets, how much of fruit, vegetables they consume, and what is the snacking pattern, and physical activity. How much do they spend playing outside of school, and how much time is actually spent on watching television or on their mobile phones. So this entire study was actually divided into 5 different modules. Module 1 was to introduce them to a healthy lifestyle and introduce the concept of food pyramid, physical activity, and personal hygiene. Module 2 was a slight more detail of the various food groups, vitamins and minerals in the diet. Module 3 is to strengthen their traditional food knowledge. So we ask them to prepare an inventory of the intergenerational food, like what were the parents' choices or the grandparents' food preferences. Fourth is fun while learning is a concept where we try to make them make play cards and herbarium, and invited them to participate in the village fairs. Module 5 is a Shiva Fairy, which is just walking around the village with them to help them identify their local and seasonal herbs, shrubs, and trees, and the various uses for fuel, food, and for medicinal purposes. Now, from the data that we've actually collected, we found that the mean dietary diversity score was much higher in the upland area as compared to the lowland area. And in case of girls, it's generally higher as compared to the boys. But when you see the total share of the various food groups in the dietary pattern, so there's no organ meat in either of the region. In the lowland area, the meat and fish, right, and eggs is lower. The starchy staples, nuts, and milk and milk products is much higher in the lowland area. But however, in the upland area, if you see, the general dietary distribution pattern is much more uniform. When we see the height for age Z scores, it is seen that they are lower in case of the upland area, and particularly in case of girls, the chances of stunting are much higher. Similarly, if we see the BMI for age Z scores, we almost found that around 6% of the lowland girls are overweight, while over 13% of the upland girls are at the possible risk of being overweight. So wasting, also we found that it is over 50% of the students have a chance of being wasted in the upland areas. But if you see a correlation between all the 3 factors, it generally it turns out to be very weak or almost nil. And the third part of a study is actually the linkages between land use, water availability, crop diversification in impacting productivity at the farm level in Akole in Maharashtra. So based on the results of this qualitative study, we've identified that the various programs which are aimed at irrigation, livestock ownership, and crop diversification all have tremendous scope in increasing the income of the people and the dietary diversity. So a very defined questionnaire-based quantitative survey is right now underway in a field site, which would assess and interlink the parameters that affect the productivity in the farms. That's all. Thank you.